My name is Waffles, and I'm a government whistleblower turned political commentator, and this is the last 24 hours in the news. It is currently June 26, 2025. So for U.S. news in the past 24 hours and the highlights, markets rally as oil surges and Fed dovishness are the two main ones that are coming up right now. Wall Street advanced with U.S. stocks nearing all-time highs. Investors cheered strong U.S. crude and gasoline demand as energy inventories fell sharply and oil prices rebounded 1%, following signs of a stable ceasefire in the Middle East. Now, that's a little bit confusing, but I will say this. Oil last year was at $75 a barrel 1 year ago, June 2024. It is now June 26th of 2025, and it is currently right now, I mean, it's at 67.9 a barrel, and we've been watching huge fluctuations day by day. So I'm not sure that I personally trust where the numbers are at right now. But supposedly this is because people believe that the ceasefire between Israel and Iran is going to hold, which does not make sense because they're still exchanging, they're shooting at each other. So the recent ceasefire between Israel and Iran following U.S. airstrikes has eased concerns about supply disruptions in the Persian Gulf. Markets had priced in a risk of broader war. Once the risk dropped, so did the war premium built into oil prices. U.S. and global supply are stable. The U.S. is pumping oil near record levels again after expanding shale production. OPEC hasn't cut production drastically, so global supply remains steady. Despite economic growth in the United States, China's economy is soft and European demand is flat. Global demand outlooks are slightly lower than expected, especially for the summer travel season. Stronger dollar, oil is priced in USD. A stronger US dollar makes oil more expensive in other currencies, reducing global demand. Investors often shift out of commodities and into equities or bonds when rates stay high or inflation eases. So I don't think I trust this. I mean, we don't even know what's going to happen with this war, but that is the current status of oil. And it just went from like $75 a barrel down to 67. This is in a very short period of time. Let us not cling to these numbers. I mean, any positive change is good, but we also don't know what kind of impacts is going on with the drilling that Donald Trump might be encouraging right now. I don't know. I don't have all the answers. I'm just reporting the news. Those are numbers, but I'm leery on that. So, and then we got Vice Chair Bowman from the Federal Reserve and Chair Powell reiterated caution on cuts, but strong demand and weak confidence data are keeping the doors open for rate cuts by September. This is the result. The whole reason why they're even discussing doing rate cuts by September is because of political pressure, especially from the gross old man who paints himself orange. Trump has been publicly demanding rate cuts multiple times over the past year, arguing that high interest rates are hurting economic growth, increasing borrowing costs, and dampening consumer spending. His calls intensified during public speeches and social media posts demanding the Federal Reserve to lower rates before the end of the year. Fed Chair Jerome Powell maintains a cautious stance on rate cuts in his recent testimony before Congress. Powell emphasized the need to assess the full impact of recent tariffs on inflation before making any policy changes. He noted that while inflation has moderated, the potential for tariff-induced price increases remains a concern. Powell stated, "We aren't commenting on tariffs. Our job is keeping inflation under control." indicating a preference for data-driven approach before adjusting interest rates. Vice Chair of the Fed, Michelle Bowman, on the other hand, supports a more immediate reduction in interest rates. She argues that inflation pressures are contained and expresses concern over emerging signs of fragility in the labor market. Bowman suggests that a rate cut could help sustain a healthy labor market and support economic stability. The division reflects in broader internal debates within the Fed, which some members advocating for proactive rate cuts to stimulate the economy, while others urge caution to avoid exacerbating inflation. Potential risks of premature rate cuts. While rate cuts can stimulate the economy by lowering borrowing costs, they also carry risks, especially in an environment where inflation remains above target levels. Prematurely reducing cuts could reignite inflation. Lowering rates too soon may lead to increased demand without corresponding rise in supply, potentially pushing prices higher. It could undermine confidence. Rapid policy changes can create uncertainty, affecting consumer and business confidence. It can reduce policy flexibility. Cutting rates early could limit the Fed's ability to respond to future economic downturns. Given these considerations, many economists and policymakers advocate for a cautious approach, ensuring that any rate cuts should be based on sustained evidence of economic weakness rather than short-term fluctuations. In a Truth Social post on June 25th, the gross old man who paints himself orange launched a personal and inflammatory attack on New York State Assembly member Zohran Mamdani, labeling him a 100% communist lunatic. That is what his statement said on Truth Social, targeting his appearance and his voice, making personal attacks, which is absolutely inappropriate. Trump also ridiculed the coalition supporting Mamdani, including Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez and Bernie Sanders. Why this matters: it is an escalation of hostile political rhetoric. Trump's statement fits a pattern of demeaning political opponents in a deeply personal and ideological manner, rhetoric which many experts link to rising political aggression and threats, particularly against people of color, progressives, and younger public servants. Targeting based on identity, Mamdani, who is Muslim and of South Asian descent, is part of a growing wave of diverse elected officials. Public targeting of him risks further marginalizing of underrepresented voices and exposing him to heightened security threats. Democratic risks: these types of statements, particularly from high-profile leaders, can undermine the norms of democratic discourse. Past examples show that such rhetoric can fuel real-world violence, including harassment of elected officials and politically motivated attacks. Sorry, I've got a kitten at my desk. Mamdani has focused on policy, not personal attacks, and responded by reiterating his platform centered on affordability, transit access, and housing justice. He declined to directly engage with Trump's insults, saying voters are more concerned about solutions than spectacle. The gross old man who paints himself orange participated in an agreement at the NATO summit in The Hague, with members promising to boost defense spending to 5% of GDP, a significant uptick that marks a notable diplomatic change. At the NATO summit held in The Hague on June 25th, 2025, member nations agreed to significantly increase their defense spending. This decision was influenced by Donald Trump's pressure to bolster collective security among growing global threats. NATO leaders committed to raising their defense expenditures to 5% of their gross domestic product, GDP, by 2035. This includes 3.5% for core military spending, that would be personnel, operations, and equipment, 1.5% for related security measures, that would be cyber defense and infrastructure. This marks a substantial increase from the previous 2% target set in 2014. A progress review is scheduled for 2029, with the final goal to be achieved by 2035. The agreement was endorsed by all 32 NATO member countries, including the United States, which currently spends approximately 3.5% of its GDP on defense. Poland already allocates over 4% of its GDP to defense. United Kingdom pledged to meet the 5% target by 2035. Spain requested an exemption, citing fiscal constraints and welfare priorities. Other nations, such as Belgium and Slovakia, also expressed reservations about the feasibility of meeting the new target. Consumer confidence slumps. The Conference Board's index dropped to 93 in June, down 5.4 points from May, as Americans expressed growing worries about jobs and business conditions. The Conference Board's index, often referred to as Consumer Confidence Index or CCI, is a widely watched economic indicator published monthly by the Conference Board, a non-profit research organization. It measures how optimistic or pessimistic consumers are about the U.S. economy in the near future. Key components of the index would be the Present Situation Index, how consumers feel about the current business and labor market conditions. Expectations Index would be how consumers expect the economy to perform over the next 6 months. It is calculated based on a survey of 5,000 U.S. households. Consumers are asked about their perceptions of current and future business conditions, job availability, and their own income. High confidence means that consumers are more likely to spend, which boosts economic growth. Low confidence indicates that consumers may save more money and spend less during a slowing down the economy. It influences financial markets, interest rate expectations, and even political sentiment. Today's U.S. stock market closes. The S&P 500 was at $607.12, barely changing. That is an increase of 0.04%. The Dow Jones DIA edged down to 429.86, losing about 0.21%. NASDAQ QQQ rose to 541.16, $541.16. That is up 0.25%, buoyed by solid performance in major tech and chip stocks. Tech leads the charge. NASDAQ outperformed due to the strength in semiconductor and AI-related stocks. S&P stays firm. Flat performance reflects balance between earnings optimism and caution over Fed outlook. Dow slightly reversed. Industrial sector softness weighed on the blue chip index. As far as what is moving the markets, that would be geopolitics. The ongoing ceasefire in the Middle East continues to ease geopolitical risk, stabilizing oil prices and lifting the risk appetite, which makes no sense to me. I don't see the ceasefire as stable. So the fact that anybody's gambling on that right now just blows my freaking mind. Federal Reserve stance. Investors interpret Fed signals as increasingly dovish, with growing expectations of rate cuts later this year. Tech momentum, strong earnings, and optimism around AI innovations are supporting tech-led gains, especially in NASDAQ components. Here's an overview of incoming hazardous weather events across the U.S. through the coming week. Heavy thunderstorms and flash flooding Thursday, June 26th. Expect afternoon showers and intense thunderstorms with gusty winds, hail, and flash flooding risk. This is the most immediate threat, particularly in the Midwest, Ohio Valley, and Central Plains. Stay alert for localized flash flood warnings and avoid travel in flooded areas or near swollen waterways. Extreme heat continues Friday through Sunday, the 27th through the 29th. Despite a cooler day, hot conditions return with highs in the mid-90s to upper 90s, 35 degrees to 36 degrees Celsius, and high humidity Heat-related illnesses, heat exhaustion, and heat stroke are likely to increase, especially among outdoor workers, elderly, and young children. Protect yourself, hydrate, limit activity during midday, use cooling centers if needed, and never leave anyone in a closed vehicle. Widespread storm risk. Monday, June 30th, scattered storms will develop again. Expect strong downpours, occasional hail, and lightning. Risk is lower than Thursday's, but affected areas should still stay weather alert. Here are the top international news highlights from the past 24 hours. Ceasefire holds as U.S. prepares for nuclear talks with Iran. A fragile ceasefire between Israel and Iran remains in place, leading to a sharp drop in oil prices, around $66.80 a barrel. The gross old man who paints himself orange announced that the U.S. is planning nuclear negotiations with Iran next week, citing the strikes as a catalyst for peace. I don't understand how bombing anybody is peaceful in any way when people are losing their lives. That is not peaceful. That is what bombings result in. God, the news is just a mess right now. Oil prices have dropped significantly. The NATO summit, and that's it. So I mean, major news for the U.S. is also the international news today. These are the highlights. These are the major things that people are paying attention into the news. I don't think that there's the only things that should be, the center of attention. But I'm doing news highlights daily right now, and I'm stormed with all this crap I gotta do. So I'm just gonna keep going. That was a difficult news session for me to try and figure out, but that is what's going on.